excited to see you step into this position, and we look lands report. Our job description is circulating now, and we'll close at the end of July, and we hope to.
Can't hear.
With the city of Reedsport. Expand their offerings.
Here on the right. So you will have an opportunity tomorrow morning to introduce yourselves. I just wanted to at least recognize that there's 3 new faces on the board today. So thank you.
So we have agenda item B now, and we get to start with our brand new executive director, Sarah O'Brien.
Thanks, friends. I'm going to pull up some slides here because I will tell you that the staff have helped me put together these director's updates, and there is a volume of work going on in this agency that I promise you, you do not want to hear me try to talk through without slides. So I have a couple little slides to share. Can you hear me okay? I don't like to get any closer to the mic than that. Can you guys put the slides up? I'm not wearing my computer glasses, so I can't see my own computer even. Well, thanks for the welcome, everybody. Good to see friends in the crowd, friends around the table here. This is my first meeting, so you should know that I'm making up most of what I say, and the staff will correct whatever I go sideways on in the course of the meeting here. But it's been a real pleasure to get around and talk to a number of board members, get to know staff, and connect with folks early on. This is the beginning of my 4th week with OWEB, and it's been a lot of fun already. Oh, I can probably do without the slides, or else she gets started there. I wanted to take a minute to introduce myself for folks who haven't had a chance to meet me, just a little bit of background, and then share a little bit about my immediate priorities as executive director, next 3 to 6 months, and sort of what I see beyond that. Every conversation I'm having with board, staff, and partners, I invite feedback on those priorities. Nothing's set in stone. I haven't had time to even fix my email signature yet, let alone set my priorities in stone. So welcoming feedback on anything that I tell you that is a priority for me at this point. Then I have a little bit of the usual kind of news to share from staff, updates on programs and projects, and then a reflection on a colleague from our conservation community that recently passed as kind of a reminder of the world, the broader world that we're connecting to here. So some pictures will come up in a minute, and one of them is a very endearing picture of me as a 7 or 8-year-old, just in case you wanted to know my age. You can pretty much date me by the haircut. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a small town in Iowa, where voluntary conservation is the only kind of conservation that occurs, and most of it is on agricultural lands, because the vast majority of the state is in agricultural land ownership. I had the luxury to grow up in Iowa in a small town where I had access to little ravines and wild spaces and farm fields. And I have read in a couple of different academic publications that that's what gives people a conservation ethic, is the opportunity. And this is interesting, not to be in the wilderness, not to be necessarily in a particular kind of environment, but to be in nature without adults present is the primary predictor of what sort of brings us to a conservation ethic. So when I go back to Iowa now, I realize that these were very small spaces, significantly polluted, and a little sketchy. But I got to run around in them with my cousins and my neighbors and my friends without adult intervention. And apparently that sets a mindset into the world that lasts for some time. Growing up in Iowa was great, but when I left, I went real far away. I've lived in deserts all around the world before moving to the west side here, which is definitely not a desert. I lived in Southern Africa, I lived in the Andes, I lived in the American Southwest. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like a desert to bring into focus the relationship between humans and nature. So working on desertification issues in Southern Africa was where I finally realized that I didn't want to be an academic. I was going to be a linguistic anthropologist before that. I can tell you over a drink what that consists of, but it's not what I did. But this idea of what it takes for people to live together in a sustainable way with nature, and what the role in particular of government is in supporting that, or allowing it, or getting in the way, or finding ways to support that, really came a lot from my international experience, and then moving to the desert Southwest, where I went to University of Arizona, pursued a master's degree there. And then I moved to Oregon, and I got to kind of grow up as a professional among some of the parents of OWEB. Folks from the Nature Conservancy, from Defenders of Wildlife, from some of whom I hope will be with us at the reception this afternoon. All kind of came with this big idea that people want to take care of their land. People want to take care of resources. People want to be good stewards. And to do that, they need collaboration, they need partnership, and they need money. And they need a significant investment of public dollars to be able to kind of make these locally led projects take root and be able to thrive and support stewardship on a broader scale. So it's pretty cool after 15 years in Oregon to be coming to work at OWEB. And it feels to me like a really daunting but positive opportunity to continue the work of the people that brought me up in this state and kind of taught me how to do business here, and taught me how to take local leadership and support it with the strength of state and partner governments, and be able to get the work done on the ground. So that's me, that's why I'm here. I was most recently at Willamette Partnership, which was a cool opportunity to do basically what OWEB does, but without the money. So it's cool to have a few more zeros at our disposal now. But I got to work on a ton of different projects during that time with OWEB staff and OWEB funding, and we got to know the team real well, and seeing the grant programs from the outside, having the chance to get to know OWEB staff over the years. And just knowing that, man, everything that happens in sort of collaborative conservation in this state, OWEB folks are right there, playing a helpful role, being good partners with a smile on their face. So it's a real luxury to be working directly with this team now. And they're just as good as they look from the outside, just for the record. So first 6 months, I don't know if folks have noticed, but it's July, and so budget season is well upon us for those of us that work in state agencies. And so for the first couple of months here, I really wanted to make my priorities twofold. One is to just get out and meet folks. I've been stuck in Portland behind a laptop, as most of us have for the COVID era, for a pretty long time. And it's been great. I've already had a chance to go out. We had our first field visit with Lindsay McClary and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde staff. Before I even started my first day, they invited me to come along and learn about some of the properties there. Had a chance to go out and visit folks in Wallowa County and Grant County, and then in Deschutes County on my way back through. So I'll continue my little tours, and it's been great to get to know folks, board, staff, partners in person. And I can't wait to get out and start seeing more projects. That's, to me, kind of the primary benefit of the job, I think, is to get out and see people's cool conservation and restoration projects. I specialized during my last couple of years at Willamette Partnership in facilitation and support to public boards and to collaborative efforts that kind of form a similar thing. I don't know if you've counted each other, but there are 18 board members here. Really diverse set of perspectives and experience and interests, and a really bizarre set of roles. Like, you are a really unique board. And a really impressive group of people coming together to figure out how to sort of support this organization in your own ways. So I'm gonna really, in my first couple of months, prioritize connecting with board members, talking about what you all contribute as a board, what you wanna contribute as a board. I'm gonna plant the seed, as I had with a couple of folks that I've already met, that it would be great to do a little brainstorming about that in October. Is there kind of a next level of board engagement or a new era kind of phase of board engagement that we might be interested to dig into some stuff together that we haven't dug into recently, and really want to hear from board, but also from staff and partners, how we can optimize the contributions and the connection and engagement with this board. I also have an opportunity, thanks to work with the Governor's Natural Resource Office over the next couple months, to get out with my two colleagues, two plus two and possibly more of my colleagues, new Natural Resource Agency directors. So Ivan Gall, who's the new director at Oregon Water Resources Department, Meg, and Debbie Colbert, who is a new director at ODFW, although she has been in state government for long enough that I'm just hoping she shows me where the keys to everything are. And does she really know her business? Those two together actually really know their business. We're going to set out around the state, do visits at the sort of recommendation and support of GNRO to federally recognized tribal government partners, and then go around and meet each other as partners in the field. So get to know, I can introduce them to SWCD, Watershed Council, Land Trust folks. They can invite me to really connect with their key partners. So I'm picturing kind of a Muppet movie, kind of like colorful van working its way around the state thing, and I haven't had anybody veto that yet. Also been asked to engage with WRD around their integrated water resources strategy, which has been on a bit of a pause while they were waiting for their new director. So it's cool to have a GNRO and a governor that really prioritize interagency collaboration. We've gotten clear directions that we're expected to know and like and work with each other. And that's kind of a cool thing to hear on your first day is, hey, you've got a set of colleagues here and you better figure out how to serve the people of Oregon and meet your missions in collaboration. So that's been a clear direction from the governor's office that I know we're all excited about. So that probably sounds good for 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. And then just look forward to hearing from you guys where we should focus on. But really getting out. Those couple of photos there are on my first couple of trips. I took my kids. I have a 12-year-old and 8-year-old daughter. They got to come out to Wallowa County with me. Liza Jane got one of them hooked on horses, which I'm going to hold against her for the rest of forever.
Thank you.
So they love recreating in the outdoors, and this has been an excuse for them to get out and know more of the state too, which has been really cool, and everybody's been really generous in connecting and sharing time with them as well, which I appreciate. Okay, what's next? News from the team. This is where I really have to start looking at my notes, and I apologize for reading a little bit off my screen here. This one I don't have to read. Huge kudos to Stephanie for her period as interim director, and for the executive team and the whole staff team. It's clear this agency has been in really stable, solid, competent, and caring hands during this period, and it made it very easy to onboarding experience. They make things so easy for me. I'm almost capable of like starting my own laptop now, but they've been just unbelievably helpful in getting me up and running. I wanted also to introduce 3 new staff members that have joined us since the last meeting. Ellen Ingemels and Shauna Topping, kind of rounding out our finance and ops project area. And then Alexa Schmidt, who is filling the, and I can't see it from here, but climate and water position, right? So diving into the natural and working lands funds and some of the projects around that. So we'll hear more on that a little bit later in the meeting. I wanted to highlight some changes, potential changes to the next open solicitation cycle. I understand that prior to COVID, there had been some discussion of potential changes to timing to avoid having those deadlines hit right at the winter holidays and right in the middle of summer vacation, which as a former OWEB grantee, I can tell you would be really nice from my perspective at that time. There was a bunch of robust engagement with partners, and then due to the COVID disruptions, it just didn't happen. So we're going to reopen that engagement and plan to come back to the grants committee in December with a recommendation. We also wanted to let folks know, historically, so OWEB has a statutory requirement for our conservation grants to have a match provided by the grantees, by the partners we're working with. Historically, some of those have passed with a $1 match requirement in the situation where there's traditionally sort of disadvantaged or underserved groups or a priority area. We've been advised that that does not meet our statutory requirement to address match. So for projects that are already funded, already underway, that'll continue to move forward according to our existing agreements. But we want to let you know that starting with the October solicitation, that'll be increased to a 5% match requirement. That's kind of seems to be the balance where we're keeping it as low as we possibly can so that that's not a barrier for partners, but it's also meeting our statute, and we don't want to look like we're faking it on our statute. So if there is frustration with that, of course, folks are welcome to pursue a legislative approach to that, resolving that. But I will say that it's possible to do that as an in-kind contribution. So folks don't need to come with that to the table in cash. And so we're hoping that doesn't raise any new barriers, but would definitely like to hear from partners and potential grantees if it does. You will note in the director's report and some of the materials for the meeting, we got a lot of rulemaking going on. So you'll hear a couple of those in the process of the meeting today, but we also wanted to let you know that rulemaking for the focused investment partnerships, the letters, the acronyms, oh my gosh, and the Oregon Ag Heritage Program sort of next round rulemaking have both started. The FIP rules, looking at the overlap rule, potentially revising language around match requirements, and board adopted ecological priorities. So we want to do some thorough engagement around that, and then the next step after rulemaking will be to dig back in to those the ecological priorities element of that program. Folks may remember, if you've been here longer than I have, that the OAHP administrative rules, the initial ones were adopted in 2019. And the Ag Heritage Commission, which Russ, I believe you've been serving on up until now, serves as the Rules Advisory Committee for that as per statute. And they'll be considering rule revisions based on just the learnings and implementation in the first few years there. So you can expect to hear back from us on those. For folks that are fans of the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund, this is our biggest year yet. So we've been notified to expect our largest award ever, $22.25 million. Thanks both to some additional, let's see, is that Bill or IRA? I think that's Bill funding that was included in the award, and just Oregon's reputation for being able to get these funds out on the ground efficiently and effectively. So huge thanks to our partners at NOAA. And we also wanted to let folks know that our award for this year includes $900,000 that are specifically dedicated to tribal project development grants. So that's the first time we'll be able to make that offering. If you can go to the next slide. The Klamath gets its own slide, and I'll try to keep us going here because I know we're probably running low on time. But there's a lot going on in the Klamath. I understand that there was a board visit not too terribly long ago and some significant funding commitments. The PCR SRF that we were just talking about, we want to let you know that includes actually some specific post-Klamath Dam removal monitoring funds for ODFW to support learning and adaptive management out of that significant OWEB investment. So that's a cool nexus there amongst the three agencies. Note, please, the staff report, the written report within the director's report section of your materials provides a lot of updates on this, and thanks to Renee and other folks on staff for that. The board has committed $15 million over multiple biennia, so we definitely are eager to go and see how those funds are going on the ground. Understand that OWEB has received an application from the Klamath KRRC, Klamath Something Renewal Corporation, I remember that much. And as part of the technical review for that, OWEB and DEQ staff went out on the ground and conducted a site visit together with the KRC team and contractors. You'll see some additional funds allocated to this program in the upcoming spending plan part of the agenda. And finally, we have launched the grant solicitation for the Pacific Corps funding for water quality improvement projects in the Klamath Basin. And that's more than $6.4 million and relates to the larger settlement agreement and can help support restoration and technical assistance grants. So that's a lot of Klamath, and there's a lot of Klamath yet to come. So we'll have more to say about that. Okay, why don't you take me to the hard slide? I wanted to have a moment just to reflect on the broader world here and to acknowledge the loss of a longtime partner of OWEB's and the conservation and restoration community throughout Oregon, Dan Bell. Dan passed away unexpectedly last month. He's been a longtime partner to OWEB. He was one of the first people that I met when I first came to Oregon, and his clarity of vision, his ability to connect with people, his ecological knowledge, his political knowledge, and just his earnest, caring demeanor. I have looked up so much to Dan over the years. I was really shocked to hear of his passing, as I know a lot of folks were. He worked for more than a decade as a program director in the Nature Conservancy in North Carolina and then in Oregon. I believe he was involved actually in the project. I think one of these photos is actually from the project we went to visit with you guys, Lindsay, Noble Oaks Preserve, and that now has been passed on to Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. He's been just the last couple of years here with Friends of the Columbia Gorge and as the land trust director, and started working with partners, a diverse set of partners in the gorge. So we'll miss Dan a lot. And I think many of us will think of Dan anytime we drive through landscapes around the state that he really cared about. So I just wanted to have a chance to recognize Dan's passing and the incredible work that he did for Oregon. Encourage folks to get out and look at some of the spaces in the Willamette Valley and beyond Oak and Prairie that Dan helped take care of and steward for future generations, and now in the Columbia Gorge. He's a really special guy. So those are my reports. I do want to reflect quickly, just kind of taking us from bad news to hope, or difficult news to hope, that this is an important time to bring people close to us and to get together with each other in person. So I was so pleased to see that we have a reception this evening. So glad to hear that many of the folks here can make it. We'll be getting together just briefly and formally later this evening for a 25th anniversary celebration. And I just encourage folks to say hi to the folks that you care about, get to know some new folks, and we get so few opportunities to connect with each other as humans in person these days that I want to make sure that we have some time to do that this evening, and I really look forward to seeing everybody there. Madam Chairs? Are you Madam's Chair, or are you Madam Chairs?
This is Barbara, and my name is Barbara.
All right, so it's maybe Madam's Chair.
Over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. So we have written reports from Eric. Audrey, are you going to talk about those to us, or counting on us to read?
Thank you.
Good.
Just background
Good,
information.
yeah, great. I hope everybody had a chance to look at those. So actually, we're way ahead, but you want to take a break? It's break time. You want to take a break? Nope, you don't want to take a break.
I think he just sneezed.
Oh, okay. Let's go ahead. Let's take a 10-minute break right now. We got ourselves going. Now just stretch it out.
Talking too long.
No,
Jeez.
you're good. You're good.
Great.
Okay,
All right.
10 minutes. We'll see you back.
Right.
Barbara, it's good to see you. Look at what they put on my laptop. Can you believe, like, in case I ever wondered
If everybody could find your way back to your seats, please.
Yeah, let me chat with Lawrence about it. Wait, how it's going. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
All right, thanks, everybody. This room had a real tone to it during break. Everybody was looking forward to visiting. So we are now on agenda item C, and it's the spending plan rebalance, and we have Miriam and Eric Williams in front of us.
All right, thank you, co-chairs, members of the board. Pleasure to see you all again here. And I'll refer you and those scoring at home to the board book, the ebook. We're on page 27. This is agenda item C on the spending plan rebalance. And so I'm going to give a little bit of background for this agenda item. Miriam's going to walk through some of the details behind the numbers that we'll talk about, and I'll summarize by talking about where staff are recommending the board place those numbers. And since we do have 3 new board members here, I think it's a good opportunity to refresh how we operate our programs in terms of the board's role in allocating funding that we receive primarily through the lottery, but also through other resources. At the beginning of each biennium, the board adopts a spending plan that has line items for each grant offering as the board is prioritized with funding available. And of course, the spending plan is for a biennium because that's what our legislatively approved budget is. We can't spend any money unless it's in a legislatively approved budget. However, we do have funding sources that do not come every 2 years, such as the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Funds. We have to apply for those every year and receive them every year. And rather than estimating, we hold off on putting that second year of PAC-SURF money into the spending plan until we actually receive it. And so as Sarah mentioned, we have a record amount of that to allocate. But there's also some other funds that have come in. And you'll notice in the staff report too that in the past couple of board meetings, we have had funds come in that needed to be allocated in the spending plan that you took action on in October, in January, and in April. So it seems like we're doing this every meeting, but that was only because of the happenstance of those particular funds coming in during those off times. This is something we do at the midpoint of the biennium, every biennium, mainly again because of the additional funds for Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery. But we also have unexpended funds from grants that came in under budget or perhaps through whatever reasons didn't take off. And so those funds are recaptured and are available for programming. We also have salmon plate funds and occasionally, as mentioned earlier, sources from other places maybe that aren't typical. So I'm going to turn over to Miriam to talk about where the funds have come from that are available to you to allocate in the spending plan, and then we'll talk about our recommendations for those funds.
Good afternoon. Miriam Scher for the record. So in your staff report, you'll see we have several buckets of funds. We have our recaptured funds that Eric talked about. In A, we talk a little bit about the lottery, the salmon plate, and PCSRF funding. So those are grants that either have not fully expended and completed their project, or perhaps if a project was canceled. So as of June, when we did our assessment, we had just a little over $2.5 million in recaptured funds. Some additional recaptured funds, and those are specific programs, are the Oregon Ag Heritage Program. And there's a dollar amount in there that we had recaptured due to a canceled grant, as well as a small amount, just a little over $38,000 from unallocated 21-23 funds that we were able to add into our recapture. And then our water acquisition program that we received a general fund appropriation last biennium, we have one project that has recaptured funds of $400,000 from that. We then have reserved grant funds, and when we established and developed our spending plan for this biennium, staff recommended a conservative 7.5% of known anticipated revenues to be held in reserve so that we could smooth any effects of drops in funding We'd experienced that in a prior biennium, and so this was a really mindful attempt for us to hold back some funds. We had $11.5 million, just a little over 7.5% in reserved funds in the first iteration of this biennium spending plan. And then in looking forward, based on anticipated reductions in the federal bipartisan infrastructure law funds that we're anticipating sort of weaning off over the next few years from our NOAA or PACSURF grant funds that Sarah and Eric just talked about. We're increasing that by another $3 million in reserve funds. So that gives us $14.5 million of funds held in reserve, just a little over 9%. So again, the intent with that is to smooth out that decline in the federal funds. So you can see funds available total are listed in Table 1 if you want to look at each of those that I've shared. And then the Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund, again, we have $22.5 million for the fiscal year, the federal fiscal year 24. So that starts in September. We're adding that into the funds available. Of that award, we have just a little over 13 million available for us to dedicate to our grant programs. The remainder is either invested in OWEB staff costs or distributed to ODF and W. So we are anticipating maybe one more round of funding with bill funds. And then we're expecting our PCSRF funding to start weaning down to that pre-bill funding of about $12 to $15 million a year. So you can see in Table 1, as I referred earlier, we have just a little over $21 million that we can add to our spending plan. Attachment A also includes some more details of those funds, how those are identified, and how we are holding those funds in reserve. So there's a lot more detail in there for the reserve funds. And with that, I will turn it to Eric to talk about how we are proposing to allocate that $21.3 million.
All right, thanks, Miriam. Last July, when the board adopted the spending plan, we did include a column in the staff report at the time showing where we would estimate we would put those additional funds at the mid-year point. And if you recall, a lot of that was allocated toward the line items that have the most money in them, the restoration grants, land and water acquisition. And so we're following through with that, although with even a little bit more money than I think we had projected at the time, again, primarily because of the record amount of PACSURF funding that we have received. And I will refer you to page 12 of the ebook. That has the full spending plan with a column showing you specifically where all of these proposed allocations are recommended to go. In Table 2 of the staff report, you'll see it's got $9.9 million for open solicitation programs, and you can see the detail of where that would go if you look at the spending plan document itself. We're proposing $4 million to be added to the restoration line item in open solicitation. That would bring that total up to $37,500,000. We're proposing another $1.9 million in restoration technical assistance line item for open solicitation, and another $2 million in land and water acquisition. The other $2 million that's in the open solicitation component of this recommended increase to the spending plan are for some new offerings that we're actually pretty excited about. Particularly the one on line 11 of the spending plan, that's a tribal project development line item that is included in our PACSURF grant application that was approved by NOAA and allows us to provide funding directly to the federally recognized tribes for project development, which essentially is technical assistance type applications that would lead to projects, restoration or acquisition projects on the ground. The other $1 million is in an item for cultural resources. We've been talking to you about our work that's continuing in developing a programmatic agreement with NOAA to essentially have OWEB ensure compliance with Section 106 of the Historic Preservation Act on any projects that we fund. This is going to create some needs for our grantees to be able to do the preliminary work that needs to get done in order to make sure that we're in compliance with those cultural resources requirement. And so that $1 million will be available for technical assistance grants to help our grantees comply with cultural resources. So that total, as you can see on table 2, is $9.9 million going into open solicitation. The Klamath Post Dam removal item, we're recommending $2.947 million. That is to complete the board's commitment of $15 million for the restoration work that's ongoing down there. So that is not news to the board. And then there's a couple of amounts that Miriam covered from what was appropriated as general funds, but has been put into our flexible incentives account, which is continually appropriated for water acquisitions. There's $400,000 there, and another $261,000 for the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program. Rounding out the additions are funds that go to ODF and W from our PAC-SERV grant, and also funds from the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission for the intensively monitored watershed project, which we've been talking to you about for many years now. And so all of that totals what you see in Table 2, the spending plan report, $21.3 million. And as Miriam referenced earlier, that allows us to increase the funds that we have in reserve by adding another $3 million to our reserve funds. And that is in anticipation of expected declines in federal funding in future years, that we will be able to keep our program offerings steady or slightly increasing the way that they have been on a trajectory for several bienniums now. With that, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? There it is. Thank you. Okay, Russ?
Thank you very much. This is helpful. I'm excited by the climate investments and the closeout of the larger partnership. But the question I keep having myself is, have we done enough on the Sprague, the Williamson, the Wood, and the Sycan to prepare for the return of salmon? And if not, should there be additional offerings specifically to address that need, as it's very, very timely challenge?
There are programs that are addressing work in those areas. A big one is the IM11 solicitation that just went out. And for those who aren't familiar with that, those are funds from Pacific Corp for mitigation purposes that were required as part of their FERC dissolution for them to basically transfer the dams. They put $6.4 million into this funds. OWEB was selected as the fiscal agent for those funds, and working with the steering committee of folks, DEQ was mentioned, but there are many other agencies. Those funds are earmarked towards agricultural water quality restoration projects in the Upper Klamath Basin. So that funding is there. We also have still a significant pot of funds for water acquisitions that the legislature appropriated last biennium, $10 million. And we've already entertained an application for a smaller project down there, at least small in terms of OWEB's contribution. The matching contributions were quite large. And we still have those funds available for that work as well. And then the other resource I would mention is all of those watersheds that you mentioned have been have had projects frequently through our open solicitation offerings, and because of the needs and the priority expressed there, they typically compete well if they're well-designed projects in open solicitation. So I'm confident we've got the funding available. Kind of excited to see what happens with the IM11 solicitation. As we've been talking about with the board, it takes capacity at the local level to be able to get those projects built on the ground. And so hopefully we'll see that come into fruition. What I'd like to see is that $6.4 million gets used up in a short amount of time. And then, we can continue to operate with our open solicitation funds to do work down there as well.
So follow-up is the tribe eligible for the 6.4?
Any eligible OWEB grantee is eligible to apply for those funds, and tribes are eligible.
Bruce?
Thanks, Eric. I was pleased to see the recent announcement that Oregon was going to be receiving $197 million from the EPA, thank you, for the climate pollution reduction. Is there any anticipation that OWEB will be involved in the administration of any of those funds?
Thanks for the question, Bruce. I just saw the headline after I arrived here today, so that's as much as I know about that.
What did he say?
I don't know is my answer.
Any other questions? Lindsay?
Yeah, thank you. I have a question. So on the ODF and W portion of the PCSRF, what, do you have a sense on what they use that funding for? Do they use it for staff? Do they do restoration projects on the ground, or?
Are you going to answer that for me?
I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to. For the record, Courtney Schaff, Monitoring and Reporting Program Manager. So typically, once a biennium, we bring ODF&W to the board to talk about how they're using those funds. At a high level, we're now doing most of it is used for monitoring. So that's where most of the funding goes. It also funds the fish screens and passage program, as well as the maintenance of those screens across the state. So that's high level, but it's significantly their monitoring program, staffing, and then the fish screens and passage program. But we will work each biennium to make sure you get a presentation from ODF and W on how they are spending the funds. Thank you.
Mark?
So, thank you. So the Monsanto funds, is it the money that we will get from the interest on the Monsanto fund, is that in the next biennium, or is it part of 23-25?
Sadly, Mark, that is funding that you will never see. The OWEB board does not have a role in expenditure of those
I thought
funds.
some funds were coming potentially, well,
That is through a newly formed Environmental Resources Council that
Yeah.
will be responsible for
Okay.
allocating those funds.
Yeah, Mark, we staff that council,
Yeah.
which doesn't exist yet, but decision-making on allocations is for the Monsanto funds is for a yet-to-be-created Environmental Restoration Council.
but we staff that council without funding.
We have funding for staff positions to staff that, and I can see Stephanie coming to make sure I
Okay,
don't
sorry.
get in any more trouble.
I don't want to create any controversy here.
Stephanie Page, Deputy Director. So $5 million was allocated to OWEB and then as well to a couple of other agencies that received positions for this biennium. Because those are operations dollars, they are not reflected in the board's spending plan.
Okay.
So the board's spending plan is for the board's grant-making work.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? I have one. So I noticed on Director's update that it was 900,000 for tribal project development, but on the line item in the spending plan, it's $1 million. Just curious.
So yes, good catch. And the difference between that is the Burns Paiute tribe has limited, doesn't have as much of their geography that aligns with the PCSRF program priorities, and we wanted to make sure we could offer this grant offering equally to all tribes, all the Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribes and Nez Perce. And so we put some lottery funds into that tribal project development grant offering just to ensure that we did not leave a tribe out.
Awesome, thank you. And looking at Table 2, the PCSRF funding, so you're hoping to spend the whole $1 million in 1 year for tribal projects, correct?
I should just, so we have, for PCSRF funding, we have 4 years to spend the funds down. So we are anticipating a robust, what I'm planning is a robust kind of webinar outreach effort to tribes to let them know about this grant offering, get some feedback. We've got webinars scheduled through August. And then what we are planning is kind of a rolling application deadline in order to meet tribes where they're at. We know each tribe has a different process by which they get approval to apply for funds. Each tribe might use the funds differently, and some might be really quick to respond, some might need to take some time to figure that out. So we plan on a rolling application deadline, As long as NOAA continues, and I should also say, we're planning on a more thorough presentation to the board in October about this offering and to go into more detail. But as long as NOAA continues to offer bill funding and this is an eligible use of grant funds, we want to continue to apply for those funds so we can get the funds out to tribes while they are available.
Thank you. Jamie?
Thank you. And your question actually helped to trigger this as a question. It's more broad than the specific allocations here, but I'm thinking of the intensive wildfires that are happening. And actually, when you mentioned the Burns Paiute tribe, I was thinking about this because of a fire that's potentially impacting the tribe right now. How are we factoring in, or how do we look at some of these projects when they may be impacted by the devastating fires we're seeing across our state? How do we respond? Are there ways that we can make allocations if someone started on something but then has to go back to it? Are we factoring that into our thinking?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jamie. I was just having that very conversation today with someone with that question. And based on our past experience, we have had the situation where a wildfire came through a project site after it had been approved and they'd already started working on restoration. And in that situation, I think we're fairly flexible in terms of making necessary scope of work changes, where normally if there aren't those kind of extenuating circumstances, if someone wants to change the scape to such a degree that we would want to have more technical review, we tell them we can't approve that as staff. It would need to come back through the review process. However, if something like that happens, we're willing to be more flexible and have been in the past in terms of altering what is going to happen on the site with the use of the funds we have available. And for project sites that may not have a project on them yet, but then need restoration, we've seen those come in as well quite often through our open solicitation program to do post-fire restoration work above and beyond what we had through those specific allocations from the legislature.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Maybe just a comment on Eric's. So I would anticipate, it's the old, you remember what I say before, give it to Mikey, he'll hit anything. So this will be, I anticipate in a future date that there will be either federal, state, or funding from these fires, because there's going to be some significant watershed damage out there and restoration activities, and hopefully either the legislature or the federal government or other sources, NGO money, or will come in, and they'll be looking for a spot to put it out on the ground to do like we did with the drought funds and those kind of things. So that's probably will be in the ballpark. I think the door will be open for us. So.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, not seeing any more. Liza Jane, please.
Do we vote?
Oops, it is action. Action. All right, I would entertain a motion, please.
Go for it. Oops.
Thank you. I move the board adopt the updated 2023-2025 spending plan and delegate authority to the executive director to distribute the additional funds allocated to KRRC, ODF&W for the PCSRF funds, and Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission funding included in Table 2 in the updated 2023-25 spending plan through appropriate agreements.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Lindsay, seconded by Kelly. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. You get to stay here.
Okay, we're going to talk about some more money. Item D is our agency request budget, and that can be found on page 32.
Everybody's going to move their mics until it stops. Did you guys want me to kick this one off? Okay, I'll try to do it without making.
Sarah's the problem.
just saying that because I'm new. If I'm doing something wrong, tell me what to do, for sure. So Mark kindly gave the introduction to our agency request budget in his last comment there, his reference, which he told me about in our first meet and greet, to the agency's tendency to get sent funds that are really important and need to get on the ground with caring and compassion, and may be a surprise to us, and may or may not come with the amount of staffing we might anticipate or the duration that we might anticipate. So in the spirit, I think I'm gonna make us t-shirts, Mark, that say, give it to Mikey, he'll eat anything. I remember that ad. I think the last couple of biennia, even observing OWEB from the outside, the last couple of biennia have really shown us OWEB's capacity to get funds on the ground for work that's within our mission, that's done in partnership, that reaches the kind of community-led natural resources conservation work that we specialize in, and our potential to contribute to the state's natural resource enterprise in that way. We're providing a really valuable service to other parts of state and federal government as part of the role that we play there. You know, we've had drought, wildfire, Bill and IRA funds that we've kind of leaned into getting on the ground, drinking water source protection, ag heritage. We've had a lot of new things come our way, and they're programs that we're really excited about and really committed to, and working hard to get on the ground as quickly and responsibly as possible, and responsively as possible. We've made that work really well as an agency, or you guys have made that work really well as an agency, I'm new. And that really comes from a commitment to the mission and partners. But I can tell you, as a former grantee, that these guys know how to do that, they know how to do it well. And they do it with a friendly face and a ton of subject matter knowledge. And I really think OWEB is the right agency to be doing some of this work, sharing some of these funds, providing those services to the enterprise. But we've asked a lot of OWEB staff as a result in terms of their flexibility in their roles, often serving in limited duration positions where they might, have uncertainty about the continuation of their position and, their family budget as a result of their willingness to kick in and serve this more flexible role. So this is a role that I feel is really important to the agency, to be able to catch this stuff and run with it and to do it with a smile. And we can't do it forever with duct tape and baling wire, right? And so one of the things that I hope that we can talk about with the board and with partners over the next period here is how we get past the duct tape and baling wire part of this. So we really need to ask about, what OWEB needs to serve this role and sustainably and predictably in the future. These funding and the programs come and go. There'll always be this cycle of ups and downs in different funding sources. Nothing is permanent in life, and we understand that, and that flexibility and nimbleness is part of what's required. And when the legislature or the governor's office or our federal partners come looking for us, we want to be there and we want to be ready for help, to help. And so that's a conversation that we're probably not going to resolve between now and the beginning of the legislative session or the agency request budget for sure. But as we're getting ready to hear from staff on the agency request budget, I just wanted to share that kind of historical arc and perspective here. That when we get to that point, it's going to be a big ask, and it's not going to be a zeros kind of big ask, but it's going to be a sort of shift to invest in the people and the systems and the positions and the sort of sustainable software and everything that we need to make that work. So I think we should consider putting some pins in things this year. Now, I know a number of folks will already know this, but we have some constraints on our budget process this year that are a little bit new to the state budget process. So that will also be, a challenge as we head into this session and think about how to keep the funding for the programs that we're even already committed to and the staffing for those programs together. So for those who maybe aren't as familiar with the process this year, the agency general fund requests in ARB form this year have been limited basically to 1% over the current service level for general funds. So service level is permanent positions. We have, I believe, 14 of our 40 are limited duration positions. So there's a big part, and many of those are supported out of different sources. They're not necessarily out of general fund. We have a lot that we would normally ask for that we can't put into our agency request budget. We want our partners to know, and this is really kind of one of my top line things as I'm going out talking to partners. that doesn't demonstrate a lack of commitment to those programs or to the work for us, that we are behind these programs, we are doing this work, we're going, as you'll see in rulemaking this week, full steam ahead. But some of the things that would normally turn up in ARB won't turn up in ARB this year. I did want to note too, in anticipation of questions, our understanding is that lottery funds are not subject to that 1% over current service level cap, but we've been asked to be modest. All of the natural resource agencies, all the agencies are dealing with similar constraints this year. Doesn't behoove us to get out there and flash around our big piles of cash. We want to be kind of consistent with other parts of the enterprise. So we've also been modest in our spending requests for lottery funds this year. So we're going to have some challenges in front of us just to keep the current balls in the air. I'm going to ask staff to sort of take it over here and start walking us through the specifics of the ARB. But we just want to make sure it doesn't escape anyone's attention that this is part of a broader conversation and that we hear what folks are saying both in and outside of OWEB and, the board and beyond, that this is, Mikey may be on the verge of eating too much here. And we need the structure to be able to follow through on our commitments and the staffing to be able to follow through on our commitments. And it's work that we're solidly committed to and we're doing our best to hold it together and we'll continue to. I think I hand that over to Eric at that point, is that right? No, they're pointing at each other. It's not me, I know that.
I'm it. So for the record, Eric Hartstein, Senior Policy Coordinator. Good afternoon. It's great to see everyone. So I'm going to give a brief overview of kind of where we're at in the state budget process. Since the beginning of this year, OWEB has been working with the Governor's Office and DAS, the Department of Administrative Services, to develop and refine our agency policy option packages, or you may hear them referred to as POPs. And these are based on the governor's priorities as well as state revenue forecasts. At the April board meeting, staff shared some of the general concepts of what we were including in the OWEB POPs with the board. And following that meeting, after further refinement with the governor's office and DAS, we're currently now at the agency request budget stage, which includes the final draft POPs that were sent to you via email late last week and are posted to our website right now. So following board approval of the POPs, staff will be writing a budget narrative throughout the month of August, which will then be submitted to the governor's office at the end of August. And with those agency request budgets submitted, the governor's office will be developing a budget, which will be the starting point for the 2025 legislative session, which will begin in January. So as a reminder, and we've said this several times, once the governor's budget is out, agencies can only advocate for the packages that are included in the governor's budget. And as the budget process develops, we will be sure to keep the board updated over the next year. And so now I will turn to that POP list that was sent out to you late last week. So I'll start with the grant policy packages before turning it over to Miriam to walk through the operations packages. But before I do that, I want to make sure, Stephanie, if there's anything that you have. No? Okay. Okay, so I'll start with the grants. Number 200. This is really continuity on both our federal and other funds that come into OWEB, the PCSRF, BLM, NRCS on the federal side, and then other funds, so OAHP, water acquisition, salmon license plate, et cetera. Then moving to packages 201 and 202, these are really just adding limitations to both other funds and to federal funds to be able to receive and expend grant funds beyond the current service level. So one thing that we know sometimes comes up as a question here is, what about the lottery funds? Why aren't these in here? And that's because lottery funds are considered current service level, so you're not going to see them in this package list. So anything that I missed on that one, Miriam, before turning it over to you for operations?
Oh, I think you got that.
Okay.
All right. Again, Miriam Scher for the record. So I will go through, in your documents, you do have the listing for the operations, and those are things that you will not see in the spending plan. So Mark, your question about the Monsanto or the Environmental Restoration Council, that $5 million would be under operations. You'll notice too on your document, we have included items in here that are specifically for the Environmental Restoration Council. Again, those won't be coming to the board, but we are sharing that for your information. So when we look at our operations, Eric talked about the grant funding for lottery. The grant funding for lottery is included in current service level. It's based on the June 2024 revenue forecast. That was already handled outside of the agency request budget, but the operations piece is where we have the opportunity to request some positions. We'll talk about continuity as well as new capacity for, those are sort of the two buckets that we have within our operations. Again, we were asked to be conservative with our operations request, our POPs for the lottery funding, just as we are one of 5 agencies that receive operations funding from the Measure 76 lottery funds. And in looking at current service level for all of those agencies, that chunk alone may be utilizing some of the reserves that we have in our lottery ops. So again, we are presenting here and submitting some pretty conservative requests for our lottery funds. So going through continuity, we have 9 positions or about 9 FTE. We have package 100 is our acquisition and special programs manager. That is an existing position that we're requesting to convert to permanent. That is a combination of general fund and lottery funding. That is utilizing our 1% of general fund that we were allowed to request. 105, and these are not numerical order, these are just sorted so that you can see continuity versus new. We have our Oregon Ag Heritage Program staffing based on funding that is considered other funding, and we have sufficient funds to carry those positions through 12 months into the next biennium. There is a need for more there, but we were limited to what we could request. So we are putting forward the POP for 12 months for those 2 positions. 106 is our water acquisition staffing, and that includes 2 positions. And again, that is in our other funds. And then our Environmental Restoration Council staffing, there are 2 limited duration positions that were approved in this biennium that we're requesting to continue into next biennium. And 109 and 110 are our federal programs. 109 is our cultural resource specialist position. Again, that is something that we have, Eric shared how our compliance with National Historic Preservation Act. We have a cultural resource specialist, and we're requesting to convert that position to a permanent. That would be funded with federal funds. And then our federal program specialist, that is also an existing limited duration position in federal funds, managing our NRCS and BLM funds and other federal funds. So that is our continuity sort of list of packages. And then we have our agency staffing capacity. We have a couple of reclassifications, and what that means is for positions that are either working at another level or we have some responsibilities that we would like to transition to that individual. Going through that reclassification process is really a human resource component, but we do need to have the limitation for the pay for those reclassifications, so if those are successful. So those are included in here. And then we have new positions that we are requesting. There are 5 new positions. One is our core grant program staffing capacity. That is a partnership coordinator that we're requesting with our lottery funds. 102 is our land acquisition stewardship and compliance monitoring. That is, again, another permanent position with lottery funds. And we included a note on here that this is self-funded. And what that means is that we're able to take some reductions in some other line items, and mostly in our materials and services line items, so that we can self-fund that and reduce how much of a burden we're asking for in new investments. And then 108 is our Environmental Restoration Council. That is additional staffing, 3 new positions, and we'll be working through that process. Again, that's in other funds. And then we have sort of its own section is 103, our POP 103, and that's Internal Audit and Compliance Services. We are required by statute to have internal audits and compliance services. We have requested funding for that to meet that requirement for 2 to 3 biennia now. Unfortunately, we have not received the funding. We still have that requirement. This would be not a new position for OWEB, but in partnership with Water Resources. They are asking for the position, and they would include that in our shared services agreement. So we would be paying half of the cost of that position. So that is our total of our operations POPs. We didn't include dollar amounts in here, but an estimates as of right now is approximately $4.3 million in funding that we're requesting, and 12.5 FTE. And I see Bruce might have a question.
Bruce, please.
I have had my heart broken on 103 for the last because I think it's essential that we have the amount of money that we deal with. I'm curious if Water Resources also has a POP in at the same time. Do we have enough if one of us gets it? Will we be okay? This is just a position that not only statute, but just as our fiscal responsibility.
Right.
And our reputation, I think, is essential for us to have. So the more we can do on that, the happier I'll be.
Yes. So again, on that, Water Resources is requesting the position authority, and then will contract with us or add it to our shared services. So our hope is that Water Resources would have that approved, and then it would move into our agreement. I'm not sure what happens if one or the other gets approved.
If I may, Director Gall flagged this in one of our initial conversations, and I know their heart is in it too. It really is. We talked about it the very first time we had coffee, and we'll do our best to make it happen.
Mark?
Okay, thank you. I noticed that which is really good news, moving LD positions to permanent positions. And I fully realize we still have to go through the governor's process before they'll come out of there and go to the legislature. But most of my questions, I have 2 questions regarding the OAHP, Oregon Agricultural Heritage. 2 questions regarding the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program. So we had positions in that the last biennium, didn't we? And were those LD? Okay, so my first question is, why didn't we try to convert those from LD to permanent?
So the source of funding was a one-time funding. It's very challenging to request a permanent position when you have one-time funding.
Okay, good answer. So we don't, with the 2 LD positions for 12 months, they're essentially half-time positions, correct? If they're only 12-month positions.
It does actually round out to 1 FTE that we're requesting for the entire biennium, because it's 2 full-time for 12 months.
So 1 FTE for 2 people. Okay, so they're half.
The way the FTE is calculated is over the biennium. So because it's only 12 months, it's considered a half FTE for each position.
Okay. Interesting. How, and maybe I'm just confused, but they're really essentially only going to work half-time, right?
I can help here. So 2 people full-time for the first half of the biennium. Yep, and that,
What about
we
the other
have,
half?
so, I just want to refresh what you've heard about the general fund, the limitations on what we can request in general fund. So our other sources of funding are the other funds, cash that we have available from the admin that we were able to take from the deposit into the OAHP account. And so that is what we have to work with, and we're trying to make the most of what we do have available to us.
So the limit, what got us was the amount of general fund we could ask for, though.
That's right.
And the reason I ask is, as you know, I'm a big fan of OHAP and the Agricultural Heritage Program, and really want to see that thing succeed. So that's why I was quizzing about that. So,
And we have had the conversations with Department of Administrative Services, Chief Financial Office, about the sustainability and the infusion of cash, and we still were held to that 1%.
thank you.
Chris?
Thanks, Liza Jane, and thanks, Miriam. Another question on the permanent versus limited duration positions, and looking at the Environmental Restoration Council positions, of which most mentioned here in both 107 and 108 are limited duration, but I guess I would have guessed that those settlement funds from Monsanto are fairly secure. So why are they, the majority of those positions, limited duration?
So I can answer the first half and then
Okay,
kick off to
perfect.
you. How's that?
That sounds perfect.
So there were some positions that were funded as permanent. Those are part of our current service level. They don't need to come forward again in our agency request budget.
Okay.
There is another opportunity and pot of funding that we're looking at. Stephanie can address why the limited duration.
So the 2 positions we're asking to continue, those were built as limited duration because the thought was after the initial rulemaking that the council will need to be doing, one of the provisions in law is that there may be an outside administrator for the grant program. And so we don't know long-term what the workload for OWEB is going to be. And so those positions were built as limited duration just so we could revisit as the council moves forward in their work, whether they are needed permanently or limited duration.
Thank you, that makes sense.
Russ?
I hate to geek out here, but to the concern about the audit, I'd like to get some clarity. Section 4 of this Constitution, state's Constitution as it relates to OWEB and to state parks, makes reference to the Secretary of State shall regularly audit program that goes on and on and on. And it describes where the funds are to come from to be able to do that. And you're speaking specifically above and beyond the state auditor, the Secretary of State, to actually have someone standing alone for the 2 agencies. Is that correct?
Yes, there is.
They're still getting the regular audit from the.
Yes. Yes, this does not replace an expected and required Secretary of State audit.
Jamie?
And actually, just to the point that both Russ and Bruce raised, really excited to see the internal audit information there. Internal audits are essentially how you learn to do your work better, and so really excited we're leaning into that. That's great. Also, just wanted to, first of all, thank you on a great list of POPs. As Sarah, as you mentioned before, in terms of working to keep this work doable for the team, and as our esteemed colleague who spoke during public comment mentioned, this is actually something that's been going on at OWEB for a while. So I wanted to give a shout out to former Executive Director Lisa, Stephanie, to your great work at continuing this. We've been talking about this for a while. Thanks to staff for the feedback you provide internally, because you've done such great work for so long, and we do want to continue that trajectory. And so really getting the resources to make sure we can do that is incredibly important. And then also OWEB, as was mentioned before, is often a go-to for other state agencies, or as other funding comes up and something has to be done right now, OWEB is the go-to. So making sure we have the resources to do that. And what I really see these making these positions permanent is maintaining that opportunity for a scalable model as emergencies hit the state. OWEB's able to do that work. So great job all around. I guess my question is, given, Eric, your mention that once the governor's budget comes out, we're kind of on lockdown. Prior to that, are there ways that either board members or our partners in the community who also recognize the importance of this behind the scenes work, but really prepping OWEB to do this, continue the work we're doing, what are those opportunities for others to advocate for these POPs now before we need to just sit back and wait to hear where the governor and where the legislature goes on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Jamie. For the record, Eric Hartstein. So you can always reach out to the governor's office, to people's legislators with the various interests that people have, the POPs. This is a public list now, and our options once we get to the governor's, once this becomes part of the governor's budget, is a little limited, as I said earlier, but people are welcome to provide their input to both the governor's office and their legislators.
And would that be to the governor's office, would that be to Jeff, or who at the governor's office? If, for instance, someone's listening to this meeting and they're trying to think about how can I be helpful, who should they contact at the governor's office?
I would recommend the Governor's Natural Resource Office. I also want to mention that many of the folks listening are probably part of membership organizations that are doing some of that work, and that would be my first point of contact. If I might, I just wanted to express appreciation for a couple of colleagues that are here today from the Legislative Fiscal Office. I just want to appreciate their efforts to be here and learn about the work that we do and learn about our needs. And they usually work quietly behind the scenes, trying to support us and helping us get the resources we need to do our work. So just wanted to express appreciation that they are here.
Can we buy them a beer later? Or?
Just don't tell us about it, Mark.
They're so expensive.
That was humor now.
I have one question, if there aren't others ahead. On the OAHP positions, what are those positions?
We've got an operations policy analyst for our program coordinator and a natural resource specialist for easement specialist.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I see no more questions. Enthusiastic faces to give me a motion. Jamie?
Chair, I move the board approve the policy option packages, or POPs, included in attachment A of the staff report for inclusion in OWEB's 2025 to 2027 agency request budget.
Thank you. Jamie has made a motion, seconded by Liz. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion passes. Thank you, staff, for hard work well done.
All right, we are way ahead of schedule. We are on agenda item E. And so we normally do, it is the time of year that we elect a new co-chair. As Liza Jane, this is her last meeting as co-chair. And we would normally do this on the last day, but not everybody can be here on the last day. So we've moved it up to today to accommodate. And if you guys recall, last spring, was it spring of 2023? We changed our language to elect a co-chair, and it is in the board packet. And each co-chair will serve a maximum of 2 years, or a maximum of two two-year terms to ensure the continued leadership. And then we did add into our language, the tribal representative is strongly encouraged to serve as co-chair. No more than one co-chair may be representative from a state board or commission. So with that, I would open up the floor for nominations, please.
Oh, good. I would like to make a nomination. I'd like to nominate Kelly Coates to serve as our next co-chair. And she's shaking her head yes to accept that nomination.
I would like to second.
All right, so there's been a nomination, has been seconded. Is there another, is there any other nominations? Not hearing any, I close the nomination, and I am going to ask Kelly if she's willing to serve as co-chair.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
All right, is there any further discussion before we take a vote on this? All right. So, hold on, I'm looking at the verbiage on here. All right, so now we are going to vote. Go ahead, Jamie.
Two comments. One, we have had such remarkable service from Liza Jane, who's been the heart and the spirit of OWEB, and you've led us so graciously. And so thank you so much for your great leadership. It's been such an honor to be. And then also with your wise nomination, OWEB will step back into having one of our, assuming we move forward, OWEB will step forward into, again, having the tribal representative be a co-leader in OWEB, which I think makes a profound statement to our entire state and to our partner agencies and to the 9 federally recognized tribes throughout Oregon, as well as near Pierce. So really excited about the next steps that looks like we may be taking. But thank you also for the nomination.
All right, so we are going to take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. All right, motion passes unanimously, and Kelly will take over at our next meeting, so welcome aboard. That went very quick. All right, so we are ending early. Oops, Stephanie.
Can we take a 10-minute break?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll be back here at 3:50, please. we are going to go to agenda item M, and who's going to do the Water and Climate Committee report?
I will.
Bruce, thank you.
Can we do?
Page 152. Page 153, Bruce.
I'm sorry, I'm running into a blue screen of death.
Do you want me to jump in, Bruce?
Would you?
Nice job. He said he'd do it. I bet there's no blue screen. And just for you, thank you, Co-Chair, for also confirming that moving this around, even though there's an action item later on this or potential action item, that we, just for the record, staff had verified that we did not need to make a motion, that it was the chair's prerogative, so just wanted to get that on record. So Jamie McLeod's going to serve with my esteemed colleague Bruce Buckmaster as the co-chairs of the Water and Climate Committee. Just as a very brief update, because the report is in the packet, we, at our committee meeting on June 12th, OWEB worked in partnership with, actually, there was a Water Acquisitions 101 presentation. There was also information provided by some of the partnership that OWEB does with partner agencies. What we're doing now at the committees, we're doing deep dives into both hot topics and tools to address water and climate impacts on watershed enhancement issues, but also OWEB's intersectionality on work with other state agencies and federal agencies and organizations on water and climate issues. We also, as issues may come before the board, we're also looking at those so that we can have more intensive conversations, and then also it almost provides a preliminary conversation with staff to hear some of the comments that board members may have or some of the questions. So we also did a brief review of the agency request budget, which the board just looked at. And then the other updates we're looking at is the implementation of the climate resolution, which was OWEB's first resolution, and looks like we'll be considering a potential second one later today. But so those were the highlights. Again, information's in the packet. Wanted to really invite members of the public who are interested in these issues and working on some of these deep dives to both recommend topics, to engage in our meetings and participate as well in our committee meetings. And lastly, just wanted to thank Brian so much for stepping in to help to staff the meeting while we were in the process of getting someone to step in that role in a permanent, long-term manner. So Bruce, or members of the committee, if I've forgotten anything, please jump in.
How's your screen, Bruce?
Seems to, looks pretty good now.
All right, moving on down to the Grants Committee, and Dan's going to give that update because Barbara keeps forgetting to put the Grant Committee meetings on her calendar. So I have asked for a whole year's worth of the Grants Committee, so it's now on my calendar, so.
You're supposed to blame the laptop.
Nah, I'll blame me. All right, go ahead, Dan.
Wait, I'm having a blue screen. We had a meeting, the summary in the board book kind of describes it. It's on the agenda for this meeting. We talked about the FIP Rule Advisory Committee. We talked about the partnership TA. One thing that's not in the notes that we talked about a little bit is it talks in here about the ecological priorities and how those are used and how we want to have more conversation about that. But I don't think it specifically mentions the fact that the board is going to be actually revisiting those ecological priorities, I think at the end of this year or beginning of 2025. And so we also had some conversation around that as well. And that's all I got.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add to the Grants Committee? All right. So we are down to number 3, the DEI Committee, and are you taking the whole thing or just the action item?
I'll be taking the whole thing.
Right on.
But I have a blue screen, so I need my co-chair. Oh, wait, I don't have a co-chair. So I'm going to take this moment to just put out there that Dan Shively was my co-chair for the DEI committee. And all eyes on Brian right
I'll
now.
not be speaking for him. So.
But I did just want to put it out there that I am looking for help with that and looking for a co-chair for the DEI committee, especially now that I'll be stepping into the co-chair role for the board. So, and we didn't talk about that at the last meeting, but thought that was a good opportunity. So moving on, if you're interested, let me know. So we met on June 4th. Stephanie updated us on the efforts and outreach to non-traditional partners. As you all recall, staff have committed to engaging with 3 new non-traditional partners each quarter. And I have to say, I was joking with Stephanie, like, I really wish she would just reach out to more people because she's not. Just kidding. She has done a great job, and the staff have done a great job of reaching out to some of our non-traditional partners and bringing in some new folks and making new connections. We had a really great visit. I actually got to go on this one, which I was very excited about, to Elderberry Wisdom Farm outside of Salem. It's a native agricultural nonprofit organization, and I think that they're poised to do some really cool things. Liz went with us as well, and it was really neat to get to connect with them and kind of figure out how we might be able to work together into the future and get kind of the restoration piece in with some of the ag work that they're doing. You can see other groups that we did outreach to: Meyer Memorial Trust, Oregon Seed Council, toured some strategic implementation areas in the lower Powder River Basin. And then OWEB staff regularly meet with other folks, conservation community members, ag and forestry community members, organic community representatives, conservation partnership. Mostly what we focused on was the latest draft of our DEI resolution, and I'll get into that in just a minute. We talked a little bit about the DEI action plan. We had an overview on the Small Grants Rules Advisory Committee, the RAC, and the Drinking Water Source RAC, which I thought was really very informative every time we can have one of those. And then we had an update on the Monsanto settlement. And then we talked about some topics for next meeting. You can read further in the written report. And I will, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those before I get into the DEI resolution.
Not seeing any.
Okay. So turning to the DEI resolution, which is item N in your board books. So I'm bringing the updated DEI resolution that's been reviewed by the DEI committee and forwarded to the board for consideration. Give a little background on how we got here. The board first started discussing a DEI resolution at the July 22nd meeting in Enterprise. We then worked on a draft and have revised the draft in committee several times since then. We've shared and presented the draft with DIS Office of Cultural Change, the Racial Justice Council, Environmental Equity Committee, and a few individual partners to incorporate their feedback. The draft was presented to the board in January and April for feedback, and OWEB staff had a chance to provide feedback on the draft at a February all-staff meeting, and that updated version was reviewed at the April board meeting. The DEI and Environmental Justice Committee received public comment at the June committee meeting that requested OWEB more fully address disability inclusion into the resolution. And Stephanie and I reached out to both the public commenter and also coordinated with the State Department of Administrative Services Office of Cultural Change to make appropriate language edits to include those public comments. And it was a lovely, very insightful educational meeting with Maya. So really appreciate her for reaching out to us. Changes since the April board meeting are shown in track changes in red in the version that is in your board packet. These changes include wording changes to include language for people experiencing disabilities. And the resolution is on today's agenda as an action item for the board to vote on for adoption. So with that, I will say that the draft resolution is just below the committee update in your board packet. So does anyone have any, well, I don't know if I kick it to the chairs for this or if I should just ask if anyone has any questions. Or if Stephanie would like to add anything.
Just one comment that one of the board members flagged a couple of just typos that, or letters that are capitalized that shouldn't be, that I've made those corrections and they don't change the meaning of the resolution, but I did want to just note that for the record.
So I have a question to educate me, since you got a good education. I'm curious of using of the word "of" disabilities. Can you educate me on that? Because I see it twice in here, and I mean, I know there's a reason, but I just want to be educated as to why.
Sure, Stephanie Page, Deputy Director. DAS advised us that we should reference people experiencing disabilities, and that the word experiencing was appropriate to use just because a disability could be a permanent experience or it could be time limited. Someone could experience a disability for a period of time. And so the only reason it's worded the way it is, experiencing of disability, is that just seemed to flow better and fit better within the sentence than people experiencing disabilities. But that was the meaning that we were going for. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Kelly, thank you for all this hard work and a very critical issue. I'm curious, as the new member of the board, how the DEI work becomes actionable on grants, and more specifically, what metrics are we to use to measure our progress against the resolution?
That is a great question. And it's actually something that we have been talking about as a board for quite some time, as far as having a DEI and Environmental Justice Committee in and of itself. We feel like we should be incorporating all of these things into everything that we do all the time, right? But for the time being, we think it's important to have it as its own standalone committee to get the resolution in place, right? And kind of move things forward with that. As far as the actionable steps in our grants, I'm going to kick that to Stephanie for.
Sure. I might just add that we've got some action items at the end of the resolution, and there is one of the action items includes amending OWEB's application, grant making, and grantee support processes to be easily accessible, time considerate, inclusive of a broader range of effective land stewardship practices, and vigilant to the needs of vulnerable and traditionally underserved communities, including providing training and assistance. So that, I would say, that is one way. I would note that we also have a DEI objective or priority in our strategic plan. And then just to provide some more granularity and a short-term implementation strategy, we also have a DEI action plan. And that, I believe that is going to be one of the next committee topics, or was one of the committee topics, where we went through the specific action items in that plan. One of the items on our wish list, and we are still figuring out how to do this, it is included in the strategic plan, is just to be able to better track metrics. But I think that is something that's going to be a challenge for us to figure out, but we did intentionally put it in there so that we hold ourselves accountable to figuring out a way to make that work.
So follow up, so I would assume, to Bruce's point earlier, that this would be something that would be auditable, that we would be able to check our progress, and the state would be able to make sure that we are measuring our progress. For example, is there a benchmark of success that we should be trying to move towards?
I would say those are some of the items in the strategic plan, is to figure out those metrics and how to do that. I would say the focus of the internal audit function is really a risk identification strategy predominantly for the agency. And I know Bruce has experience with being on the internal audit team for ODFW, if I remember correctly. So please feel free to add to that, Bruce, or correct. But certainly we will work on metrics and evaluate how we're doing as we figure out methods. So anything you'd like to add, Courtney?
I would just add that the DEI action plan is something we are going to talk about in detail at the next committee meeting. And we have to submit that annually back to DAS, the Office of Cultural Change. And in that, it has a little bit more, it ties to all of our plans, including the strategic plan, and we'll be talking about progress in that document, and we are submitting that annually. So we will be talking about it. So a great kick over to, hey, come help Kelly chair that committee. Part of that conversation.
We'll also, if I may, we anticipate bringing the draft strategic plan in the next meeting. I understand that was pretty close to the finish line with you guys, and then was held up for my arrival. And so I've been working through that with staff and with the consultant, and we'll bring that back. And there are a lot of, measurable, clear outcomes related to DEI work there appropriately so.
All right, any other questions or comments? Oh, sorry.
In the February meeting with staff regarding the resolution, we did an overview which said that the resolution itself needed to address the situation as it is. Where do we want to go? How do we want to get there? But it did not address how fast do we go. All of the details, some of which were mentioned in the further resolved and actions, but the resolution itself is not prescriptive. It addresses all Oregonians, and our commitment, our resolve to supply the benefits of OWEB to all Oregonians. And from then on, we've got a lot of work to do.
Aaron.
Thank you. Aaron Curtis, ex officio member representing the Bureau of Land Management. And I just wanted to throw in there, as a committee member helping with this one, I just want to thank Kelly and Bruce for their leadership and diligence working through this. I want to thank all of the other committee members for coming to the table with an open mind. I think we all learned something as we developed this. I think we learned more today, right, as we were talking about the updates. So, and then just something for the board to be aware of as you go into the vote of, I will just attest to pretty much every word, every comma, every quotation mark has been very thoughtfully considered and discussed and rediscussed. And so, but overall, it was a really big effort, and I think it was a lot more difficult than anybody thought when we got rolling on this. But I think the end product is something we can be proud of. Thank you.
Kelly.
Yeah, and I have to give a big shout out to Bruce. He did so much of this work, and Mrs. B too. Yeah, she really, Mrs. B is like our, attention to the man behind the curtain. She does great work for us. Really helpful. No, and in all seriousness, really, it was a lot of wordsmithing, and I mean, Erin is totally on point when it's literally sentence by sentence. How do we want this? Because we wanted to get this as right as we possibly could, knowing we'd never get it perfect. And the other thing, Russ, to your question is, we did the same thing with our climate resolution. And so the questions that you have, I think, are fantastic. How do we make this actionable? How do we track this? This isn't the first time we've done a resolution and had to incorporate that into our grant making and strategic plan and our action plans. So as much of a process as this was, having come in on just the tail end of the climate resolution, I feel like we already had a template ready to go, which was really helpful. And knowing moving forward how we're measuring and doing things with our climate resolution gives me a lot of faith that, yeah, this is going to be actionable and tracked in a lot of ways. So, sure.
Jamie?
Also wanted to say thanks to everyone who worked on this. It's a tremendous amount of work. And really, Russ, really appreciate your comment about, okay, how do we do this then? And Kelly spoke to that, but it's really this sense of today's an opportunity to formally say this is a priority for us and then get into those details. And I would love to see at the committee level, all the committees go back and start to ask essentially your question and challenge ourselves from all those different perspectives. How do we make proposals and bring them forward to the full board? Because I think you're absolutely right on. It's the idea, but then how do we move forward on that idea? So thank you for that. I also want to, just as we're looking at this, because I know there's some people who get really excited about this work and some people who ask more questions about it and could take a step back. I want to refer to the very eloquent introductory remarks of our outgoing co-chair, who made a reference to the fact that sometimes the noise of politics gets in the way of our ability to work together as Oregonians to take care of our communities. And the essence of this resolution is essentially, how do we better serve all Oregonians? And that's the thing that I love so much about it. And there was so much wordsmithing, and we know that words, sometimes we get them right, but that is truly, for me, the essence of this. And our commitment to that, I think, is a really important step that we can take today as a board. And then if there's things we didn't get exactly right, we'll figure it out as we go. But this really speaks to the spirit that I've seen from staff, I've seen on this board, that I'm really proud of. And so really, for those who might look at some of the words and say you didn't get exactly right, I would just really urge, again, to that concept of this is how we better serve all Oregonians, and to really approach it with that spirit.
Bruce?
Yeah, I will make one final comment about the wording. Like the climate resolution, there was careful attention paid to the enterprise, Oregon enterprise, all the agencies, task force, people, other co-natural resource agencies. The wording is consistent within the state. Our resolution on the climate and our DEI resolution all are consistent with what has been put forward by the equity task force.
The Environmental Equity Committee of the Racial Justice Council.
So there are variety. So all of those have been reviewed to be consistent with the language here. So we should have no problem saying this is not the same as other agencies. So.
It's a Jedi.
All right, Liza Jane?
A little bit to your question, Russ, which was really valuable. I see this resolution as a way to hold ourselves accountable to the people of Oregon and to ourselves and to the people that we make grants to. It's there, we're gonna own it, and we're gonna walk with it. And I think that's really what it does for us. And measuring is difficult, but either I dreamed it or it's real, that we're gonna continue training the board and the staff. That really is a positive path to continuing to find ways to be better. And I hope we actually do that. It's important.
All right, I would entertain a motion on this resolution.
I move the board adopt the DEI resolution as described in attachment A.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Liz, seconded by Bruce. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. Further discussion, this is not the finishing line. This is just the beginning, because I think it's a document that's going to constantly be changing. So thank you for all your hard work, everybody. All right, so with that, I think we're going to adjourn? I think we are going to adjourn a little bit early, so people can get checked in. And then, any logistics we need to know? Okay.
I have a question about logistics. How far is it to High Street?
3 miles.
3 miles.
3 miles. So, all right, everybody, this meeting's adjourned. We'll see you all here in this room at